Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin today's seminar. For the smooth process, please put your mobile phone into silence mode during the event. Good morning and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and all the attendees who are watching via YouTube live streaming. Thank you for attending the 2023 seminar on potential for trilateral trade cooperation among Korea, the European Union, and the United States, which is hosted by Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, Korea Foundation, Bridge University, Brussels, Korea Chair, and Korea Economic Institute of America. I'm Namin Yoon from the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, and it's an absolute honor to be here today. We will now begin with the opening session. The opening remarks will be delivered by Chul Jung, Senior Vice President for External Affairs for Korea Institute for International Economic Policy. He will be delivering the remarks on behalf of Seok Lee, President of KIEP, who is unable to attend today's seminar due to the National Assembly meeting. Please give him a big round of applause.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chul Jung, Senior Vice President of KIEP. I'm here to deliver these opening remarks on behalf of KIEP President Seok Lee, who is attending all important budget-related sessions at the National Assembly. I'm pleased to welcome all of you to this Trilateral Trade Cooperation Seminar. I'd like to thank KEI President Ambassador Kathleen Stevens, KF-VUB Korea Chair, Dr. Ramon Pacheco Pardo, distinguished guests, and all the participants here today. I also would like to thank the staff of the KF-VUB, KEI, and KIEP for their hard work and excellent coordination leading up to this seminar. It is very timely and meaningful to hold this trilateral seminar at a turbulent time when the world economy is facing huge uncertainties. First of all, I'd like to emphasize that we all have strengthened our economic relations so far. The volume of trade and investment between Korea and the United States has expanded significantly following the implementation of the cross FTA in March 2012. Specifically, the trade volume between the two countries almost doubled from $100 billion in 2011 to $192 billion in 2012. Korea's FDI in the US more than tripled from $44 billion in the period of 2002 to 2011 to $150 billion in 2012 to 2021. And the US FDI in Korea doubled from $24 billion to $48 billion for the same time span. We have also observed the increasing trend of trade and investment between Korea and the EU since July 2011, when the Korea-EU FTA took effect. In 2021, bilateral trade in goods reached 107 billion euros, an increase of 71% compared to 2011. And bilateral trade in services also increased by 72% compared to 2011, reaching 19 billion euros. In terms of FDI, the EU is the largest investor in Korea, accounting for 32% of the total FDI balance, larger than Japan's 24% or the United States' 16%. In addition, the EU and the US have one of the largest bilateral trade and investment relationships in the world. Their bilateral trade reached 1.2 trillion euros in 2021, which is more than 10% above the pre-pandemic level. Total US investment in the EU is 4 times higher than that in the Asia-Pacific region, and the EU's FDI in the US is about 10 times higher than EU's investment in India and China combined. All these very close economic relationships among the three of us have contributed not only to the expansion and accessibility of markets and goods and services, but also to the creation of a stable and predictable environment for investment, which has significantly strengthened and deepened our trilateral trade and investment relationship. We face new challenges globally, such as economic security, digital commerce, critical and emerging technologies, climate changes, and so on. All of these challenges are so complex that they should be addressed through cooperation among like-minded countries such as Korea, the EU, and the United States. Because of the complex structure of the global supply chains for semiconductors, EV batteries, and critical minerals, economic security cannot be guaranteed by a single country. Rather, it requires collective efforts and coordination by a group of countries. To this end, we need to accurately assess the current state of global supply chains and the causes and effects of their reshaping. We have developed several ways to work together on some of these global challenges. For example, Korea and the US recently agreed to cooperate in critical and emerging technology areas such as open LAN, 6G, AI, and quantum technology based on a joint statement at the Korea-US ICT Policy Forum held on September 12th this year. These technologies will also play a critical role in promoting both bilateral and multilateral digital trade. Another example of cooperation comes with a new EU-Korea digital partnership, which was launched on November 28th last year. This will promote joint work on semiconductors, next-generation mobile networks, quantum and high-performance computing, cybersecurity, AI, and so forth. Lastly, green and digital transformation are becoming critical pillars of post-pandemic recovery. Korea, the EU, and the United States share a compelling need for greater cooperation in order to address all the challenges posted in the green and digital sectors. This is another reason why I have said that today's seminar is timely and meaningful. Certainly, today's presentations and discussion with full of creative ideas and practical proposals for trilateral cooperation can contribute to developing policies and strategies for the long-term prosperity of Korea, the EU, and the United States. I look forward to this seminar, and thank you very much.
Thank you for the remarks. Next, to give us a welcoming speech, I'd like to invite Catherine Stevens, President and CEO of Korea Economic Institute of America, and who is the former U.S. Ambassador to the Republic of Korea. Please join me in welcoming her.
Good morning, everyone. Aneshmika, thank you so much for welcoming all of us here today. I'm down as giving a welcoming speech, but I feel like I should first and foremost thank, as Dr. Chung Chol did, everyone who has organized this gathering, who has taken time to come here, who has welcomed my team from KEI and from the United States to this event. Dr. Chung, I think you outlined very beautifully the strategic sort of goals we have for this gathering today. It is really a privilege for KEI to be a part of this. This is a partnership between KEI and KIEP here in Seoul, and I just say Ramon, but we call it the KF-VUB Chair. And it's our own version of a trilateral. I know there's been a lot of attention, and rightly so, in recent months to developing trilateral dialogue, US, Japan, Korea, and other trilaterals. This is one that we started kind of more formally, I think, last year with a conference that we had in Washington. We're doing this now here, and we're looking forward to going to Europe. And for all the reasons I think that Dr. Chung has already outlined, so I'm not going to try to just repeat those for you, but say how important I think that this is not a one-off. This is an ongoing effort to get together and talk about, and I was talking with some of you earlier, but talk about some of these issues that are quite new for all of us. Even a kind of a new vocabulary for talking about them, and require new kinds of partnerships, expertise, and dialogue. Certainly in my career as an American diplomat over the last several decades, from Washington, we tended to kind of divide the world into, your country is always kind of the middle of it, right? If you look at it, we would sort of think about transatlantic issues and trans-Pacific issues. And I think in the way that we deployed our expertise and our personnel, oftentimes those were quite separate realms. I remember when I was working in the East Asia Bureau, I would occasionally go to Europe to talk to the Europeans about what was happening in Asia. But we didn't really do like trilaterals with our allies. We're in a different world now, as we all know, and part of this is we need to bring together different formations to have the kind of discussions and analysis and policy recommendations that we're going to need going forward. So I look forward to being a part of this. Thank you for welcoming us. I do want to, again, thank all the staff at KIEP for all their hard work, not only today, but support to KEI over always, and to everyone else who's contributed to this. I was just going to say as a final, maybe it's a little bit too lighthearted, but I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't read newspapers very much more in hard copy. I read them online, but whenever I travel, I like at a hotel to kind of get the newspaper, and this is the English language version of the Jungang Ilbo, and sort of look at it. It just has a kind of a reality. It's part of traveling. And I have to say, so I thought, okay, what's on the front page? I mean, the world is on fire. What's on the front page of the Korea Jungang Ilbo today? There's a reason I'm mentioning this. And the top headline is, Seoul announces plan to fight bedbugs. And I was thinking about, I saw a headline about that in Paris, too, and also in New York. And I guess you could say it is tied to other trends, perhaps, but there's that. And then there's to the right, and by the way, the U.S. Secretary of State is in Korea today, but the headline is not about that. It's U.S. removes Korea from currency monitoring list. Very interesting. And then the third article at the bottom is President Yoon going to APEC, going to San Francisco next week, and then going to Britain, France, and the Netherlands. That, to me, also reminds us how, as Dr. Chung said, how timely this is. How timely this is as we watch Korea in this very energetic outreach, as we see our own administration in the United States working to strengthen our relationships with allies and partners, and doing it across a range of issues that honestly a few years ago we weren't even really talking about so much. So again, I'm pleased to be here. I'm looking forward to the discussion. It's great to see so many old friends and to meet some new friends as well. Let's have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you for your words. Now the welcoming speech will be delivered by Ramon Pacheco Pardo, KF-VUB Korea Chair of Brussels School of Governance. Please give him a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief because, of course, we are over time already, as it happens. I want to thank everyone for attending this event. I want to thank KIEP and K for partnering with us in working on this very timely project. As Ambassador Stephens mentioned, we had a meeting last year in Washington, D.C. We have this one in Seoul this year. We'll go to Brussels next year, so we look forward to welcoming you there as well. And I think even though the topic is potential trade cooperation between the three partners, I think what we have realized is that we're moving from the potential to the actual practical cooperation. I think we'll see this during the discussions today, that as much as when we started the project with both partners, we're thinking, okay, what can we do together? Now we're moving towards what we are doing together and how we can further strengthen this relationship that is not only about trade anymore, as Professor Chol Chong, for example, mentioned, right? It's also about economic security. It's about supply chains as well. And a couple of final words from my side. I do agree with what Ambassador Stephens said. Even from a European perspective, we used to look at the transatlantic relationship as separate from the Europe-Asia relationship, and this is clearly not the case anymore. They are interconnected from a European perspective, obviously, when it comes to economics, because of trade, because of investment, because of supply chains and economic security more broadly. And I think you will see this during the two panels that we have today. We have representatives from the EU delegation, and we have representatives also from the Swedish Chamber of Commerce as sort of representing businesses here in Korea, and I think these two are inseparable today. And not only this, the relationship used to be more based on liberal values, so to speak, right? So open trade, open investment, and this has shifted clearly with the tensions that we see at the global level. And I think this was reflected in the discussion we had in Washington, D.C. Last year. Is certainly reflecting the discussions we have in Brussels on a regular basis about cooperation with Korea, with other partners here in Asia, and obviously with the US, so this has shifted the discussion. And last but not least, I want to thank KIEP for organizing this event. They were the leaders really behind the event today. And we're very grateful of all the effort that they put into surely will be a successful event. So thank you very much, and I look forward to discussions later today.
Thank you for your remarks. Now the congratulatory remarks will be delivered by Byung-nae Yang, Deputy Minister for Trade of the Republic of Korea. He will be delivering the remarks on behalf of Deok-eun An, Minister for Trade of the Republic of Korea, who is unable to attend due to the business trip today. Please give him a big round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a replacer of Trade Minister, Mr. An. He's in Tanzania and maybe now flying to Czechia at this moment. I am Byung-nae Yang, Deputy Minister for Trade at MOTI. Congratulations on the holding of the 2023 seminar on potential for trilateral trade cooperation among Korea, EU, and US. I would like to extend my gratitude to Vice President Jung Chul of KIEP for inviting me to this meaningful event. Also, it is a great honor to see Ambassador Sung-lim Chair and Minister Tae Ri. And my thanks also go to President Catherine Stephens of KEI, Professor Raymond Pacheco Pardo, Counselor for Economic Affairs Andrew Herrera, as well as Ambassador Maria Castillo Fernandez. The global trade environment is witnessing unprecedented change. In addition to the Russian-Ukraine war, the crisis in the Middle East is rapidly deteriorating. Furthermore, responses to supply chain disruptions and climate change are emerging as new trade barriers. Against this backdrop, the role of trade authorities in changing environment is of the utmost importance. The Korean government is making multifaceted efforts while engaging in close communication with industries. We are successfully diversifying supply chains through the expansion of our trade network, as well as striving to establish economic cooperation frameworks, such as IPEF, to secure stable supply chains. In October, former Deputy Prime Minister Hyun Oh-seok stated that economic cooperation between South Korea and Japan represents the best economic policy. Likewise, we can assert that trilateral economic cooperation among Korea, EU, and US is the best economic policy for three countries. By enhancing cooperation with the US, Japan, and EU, the Korean government is also safeguarding its domestic industries. Furthermore, despite the concerns of the US IRA, industrial cooperation and trade investment between Korea and US has dramatically increased. And uncertainties regarding export controls on semiconductor are declining with the designation of validated end users. Moreover, Korea is recovering its economic vitality through growing exports. Amidst ongoing uncertainties, Korea will promote trade policies that enhance industrial competitiveness and respond to external risk factors. First, we will diversify industrial supply chains by gradually expanding trade networks through diverse platforms such as FTAs, EPAs, and TIPs. Furthermore, we will diversify specialized supply chains alongside strategic partners. Korea will actively address trade issues through various channels, including Korea-US supply chain commercial dialogue, Korea-US-Japan industrial ministerial meeting, and Korea-EU supply chain and industrial policy dialogue. In addition, Korea is participating in establishing trade rules in growing sectors such as digital, green, and bio industries. Distinguished guests, now we are living in 5G era, but 3G from a certain country makes us difficult to live. 3G is gallium, germanium, and graphite. As you know, trade policy ever follows real economy. Major countries are swiftly adapting to the changing trade environment. Indeed, challenges such as supply chain restructuring and climate change require joint response from international community. As such, your insights and wisdom will enable Korea, US, and EU to resolve trade challenges, alleviate polarization, and achieve co-prosperity together. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the remarks. This time, we are going to watch a congratulatory video message delivered by Maria Castillo Fernandez, the ambassador of the European Union to the Republic of Korea. She could not make it to our seminar today due to the business trip to Brussels, but she kindly sent this video message for us. Let's meet her through the video.
3, 2, 1. Dear Senior Vice President of the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, dear President of the Korean Economic Institute of America, dear Ramon, dear speakers and participants, it's an honor and pleasure to be able to deliver these congratulatory remarks for the seminar on potential for trilateral trade cooperation among Korea, the EU, and the US. I'm in Brussels at this time, so I cannot join you today. But my message is simple. In this multipolar world with so many global challenges today, it's very important, even more than ever, that like-minded partners work together in many areas. Let me mention just a few. Promotion of multilateral framework and rule-based order. This is about common values, universal values, human rights, multilateral order. Everything is now put into question. So therefore, we need to work more closely together and to extend to other and reach out to other partners. In particularly, the ROK has very good relations with many countries in the Indo-Pacific. We need to be able to reach together to other parts of the world, other partners in the world. Openness of markets. This is about an open and fair and sustainable trade and investment. Economic security principles, we are all seeking them. We are all interdependent. Neither Korea, nor the European Union, nor the US can do it alone. Our economic strategy is about outreach to partners, in particular the like-minded, about diversification, about de-risking. We need to work together on this. our green and our digital transitions. We all have to go through this. We have COP28 coming very soon. So we need to push and be more ambitious in our green agenda. We have no choice if we want to stay competitive. On digital, Executive Vice President Dombrovskis was here last week and announced the launch of the digital trade negotiations with Korea. It's very important that we manage together the digital world, emerging technologies, but that we also work together on the access of raw materials and technologies. Finally, a word on security. What happens in Ukraine has an impact here. It's also the case for the Middle East. It's also the case for tensions in the Indo-Pacific and, of course, on the Korean Peninsula. And we are looking very attentively to what the DPRK is doing. The list of issues for our joint work is very long. So let us begin with some concrete ideas. That's what I am asking you. But always with the mind that the rule-based order and multilateralism are key for the future of our cooperation. Thank you very much and wish you all a very fruitful discussion.
Finally, I'd like to invite Andrew Harrop, the Minister Counselor for Economic Affairs of U.S. Embassy Seoul, to give us a congratulatory remarks on behalf of U.S. Embassy Seoul. Please give him a big round of applause.
Good morning. 안녕하십니까. I would like to thank KIEP Vice President Chung Chul, KEI President Ambassador Kathleen Stevens, and VUB Korea Chair Ramon Pardo Pacheco for inviting me to join you today. It is a great privilege to speak alongside EU Ambassador Maria Castillo-Fernandez and Deputy Trade Minister Yang Byung-nae. I am excited to see many distinguished panelists, including former Vice Minister Lee Tae-ho and Ambassador Chae Sok-young. Today's panelists will enrich today's discussions on U.S.-Korea-EU trilateral economic security, technology, digital trade, climate change, and energy cooperation. These are some of the most relevant and important topics all economies grapple with today. So let me start with a couple of the collective global challenges we all face. First, in the face of Russia's expanded invasion of Ukraine and the war between Israel and terrorist groups led by Hamas, the United States, the Republic of Korea, and the European Union must stand together to support our allies and secure global peace and stability. Second, the COVID pandemic demonstrated our collective reliance on critical supply chains for everything from semiconductors to vaccines and personal protective equipment. Economically, some adversaries have shown a willingness to abuse their economic power and to weaponize interdependence to coerce geopolitical gains. We need to ensure stable, secure, and resilient supply chains. Third, authoritarian regimes seek to develop critical and emerging technologies to support military applications, to further control their own populations, and to export surveillance capabilities to third countries. Some of these countries further undermine global trade rules to provide unfair advantages to their domestic industries. This makes it all the more important that we, the United States, the Republic of Korea, and the European Union strengthen our economic cooperation as like-minded and democratic partners. We have a strong base on which to build. The European Union and the United States have the largest bilateral trade and investment relationship and enjoy the most integrated economic relationship in the world. Following the implementation of the US-Korea and the EU-Korea FTAs over a decade ago, our trade and investment, our trilateral trade and investment has grown dramatically. Our three economies' supply chains for critical and emerging technologies are deeply integrated, and our firms rely on each other to produce the cutting-edge goods and services needed to power the world. For example, chips designed in the United States are produced in Korea using equipment manufactured in the EU. As the United States, Korea, and EU member countries work together to develop next-generation technologies, we have a shared interest in protecting those technologies, ensuring they do not fall into the hands of those who would use them to undermine peace, security, and human rights. We must also collaborate to set the standards and norms that will govern these technologies to reflect our values. Together, we are leveraging the unique capabilities of the private sector in each of our countries to promote supply chain resilience, as well as advances in technology security standards, clean energy, energy security, biotechnology, critical minerals, pharmaceuticals, AI, quantum computing, and scientific research. Frankly, I could have added a couple more examples to that list. Our partnership on export controls has been groundbreaking. We are working closely with our allies, like Korea and our partners in the EU, to protect our national security by limiting the export of technologies that authoritarian governments could use to upgrade their military and surveillance capabilities. For instance, we have successfully partnered with our allies to counter Russia's access to equipment and technologies that empower its aggression and to address the risks to our collective security that China presents. As we consider new controls in the future, we seek to be strategic and precise in the technologies we target through our export controls. As the US National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, has put it, we seek a small yard with a high fence. As Korea aims to become a global pivotal state, we cooperate more closely than ever in advancing economic prosperity and security. The potential for trilateral cooperation between our three economies is enormous. Our trilateral cooperation can build on the existing FTA frameworks to encompass modern-day issues such as climate change, economic security, technology, and women's economic empowerment. As advanced economies and partners, we may sometimes have different views on how we meet our climate commitments, craft industrial incentives, or capitalize on the promises a global and digital economy provides. But our shared values set a strong foundation for our cooperation. Thank you. 감사합니다.
Thank you for the remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, now we'd like to conclude the opening session and begin today's first session. The topic of the first session is potential and prospects for trilateral cooperation. This session will be moderated by Seok-Young Choi, the former ambassador of permanent mission of the Republic of Korea in Geneva. Moderator and the panelists of the first session, please take your seats in the podium before the session starts. Please put your hands together for them.
Hi, good morning. I'm honored to be invited as a moderator of this important session. This session is devoted to the prospect and potential for trilateral cooperation between United States, EU, and Korea. We are witnessing unprecedented transformation of global trade environment. The most fundamental change is that unilateralism and inward-looking protectionism has become a new normal. In addition to the changing geopolitics, such as the Russian invasion to Ukraine and US-China strategic competition, the pandemic and the rapid process of green shift and digital transformation have rendered far-reaching implications on global trading environment, as well as global supply chains, particularly in critical raw materials and technologies. Many countries, including US, EU, and China, have provided substantial subsidies to its core industries, such as semiconductors and batteries, and strengthened export control regime as well as investment screening system. Some other countries have taken also repeatedly economic coercive measures in order to achieve potential political objective of the countries. Today, we have three prominent panelists with me. We will discuss primarily three topics. Actually, we have only 60 minutes, but we have three topics to discuss, such as WTO-related issues, and second, supply chain resilience in the context of weaponized interdependence, and thirdly, how to promote institutional mechanisms of the three countries. Considering limited time, only for each topic, I just would like to allocate 15 minutes. Therefore, each panelist can speak in each topic around 5 minutes, not more than 5 minutes, in order to save time for the general Q&A session at the end of the session. With this in mind, I just would like to turn over to topic number 1, WTO-related issues. The industrial subsidies and other unilateral actions competitively employed by the United States, European Union, and China look inconsistent with the multilateral trading norms. Nonetheless, the key functions of the WTO are virtually paralyzed. It's quite unfortunate, and unable to properly deal with these problems. In addition, the global FTA networks are fragmented and slowed down, while a new type of regional cooperation frameworks are observed, such as IPEF type of regional cooperation. Now my question to the panelists. The well-functioning of the open, transparent, and rule-based multilateral trading system is a very important, a very valuable global public goods for the three countries should promote. How could the trilateral work for the alleviating uncertainties coming from the fragmented the trade environment, and how to promote revitalization and the reform of the WTO system? That is my question to all of you. I just would like to ask Christoph take the lead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Choi, for inviting me, inviting the EU to this conference. Thank you to the three organizations for hosting us. You have heard my ambassador in this recorded message, so I'm not going to repeat what she said. This is for the broad picture. I think you will give me the opportunity later on also to develop, let's say, a little bit about the parameters. What could be the parameters for this trilateral cooperation? So I will not go into this for the time being. I will keep it for later. A couple of remarks to start. First, what we see is a rise of power politics. This has been mentioned by previous speakers. We see a weaponization of everything. Indeed, multilateralism is in crisis. The WTO relevance is eroding. But of course, the EU cannot give up on the rules-based multilateral order. That's really our point. Why we cannot give up on WTO? First, because power politics may work for the big twos, what I would call the big twos in the world, but not for middle powers. And that may surprise you, but the EU is a middle power, in fact, just like Korea is, or maybe Japan. Why that? Because we lack a number of key sovereignty attributes, like autonomous defense, It's just as simple as that. The EU, maybe you have noticed this, the EU has developed recently an economic security policy. There are what we call the 3 Ps. It's not the 3 Gs, it's the 3 Ps. So it's promote, protect, and partner. This strategy was released in June. Of course, for partner, then comes countries like Korea. We have an FTA, of course, with Korea since 2011, with 132 billion euros of exchange, of trade between our two countries. And maybe, if you allow me, a final remark from my side. We see indeed a lot of rhetoric about fragmentation. We see also, you're absolutely right, a number of measures and policies, unilateral measures that may not be WTO compliant. But at the same time, I looked at the trade volume, the global trade volume is still increasing. So I want to make the distinction between the rhetoric, the policy measures that indeed point to a fragmentation, and the actual trade volume. We don't see a de-globalization yet in the trade data. That's my point. I will stop here for now. Yeah.
Thank you. Matthew?
Thank you, Ambassador Che, and thanks to the three organizing institutions for inviting me here. Really important to have this kind of conversation because there is a real opportunity and a need for cooperation among these three significantly large powers. I think Korea and the EU are big powers in economics, at least. So I think this is we have a reason to talk about this. I also, just as a preamble, want to say I do think we need to be honest and realistic about this. This is hard stuff because although we share values and approaches to many things, and we do, we're also competitors with each other. That's sort of different from the security world where we're kind of facing a common threat and we can align. And I'm sure there are many issues in those areas as well, but fundamentally the problem with economics is it's really driven by private sector actors who are in competition with each other. So I think this is a more difficult conversation than, in some ways, than a sort of traditional alliance conversation or security-related one. So with that as backdrop, I would say, look, I agree with what you've said, Ambassador Che and Christophe, so far. I think that the WTO system is troubled, and to put it mildly, and yet still vitally important. Not everybody in Washington agrees with, well, they agree with the first part, the WTO is troubled, but not that it's important. I still think it's important to have a floor of multilateralism beneath things that we create above that, including trilateral mechanisms that we're going to talk about later. As I should probably, this is on the record, right? So I guess, anyway, it doesn't matter, it's fine. I'm going to get in trouble with the White House, I'm sure, but when the National Security Advisor gives a speech in late April about the economic order, and on the one hand says WTO still matters, but really what he said was, the system that we created after World War II was great for a while, but now it's not as useful as it used to be. And in the question and answer after the speech, he actually used a metaphor, two metaphors really, to say that we're not going to build going forward a kind of Parthenon with pillars in the order, implying it's sort of a nice old thing to go and visit, but it's crumbling and not very useful today. Instead, we're going to build a Frank Gehry, G-E-H-R-Y, type of building, which is a sort of, strangely shaped building architecture. I agree with him that we should build, and we are going to talk more about this, we need plurilateral mechanisms, including trilateral ones. But a Frank Gehry building without a foundation is essentially a tent. You still need the foundation of the multilateral order, and certainly you need it both for substantive reasons and also because every other country in the world, even if the US doesn't believe in this, believes we need to have that appeal, whether it's because they're a small country or middle power or because they believe in the rules. So I think this is that's kind of the basic point I want to make, but I would say there's a lot that needs to be done to reform the WTO, including maybe especially in the area of subsidies. And I wish we had more time to talk about this, but just in 1 second, I would just say, you know, the problem is that the system set up in the GATT and then the WTO in the mid-90s really was to deal with a different problem in a way. It was a set of specific government, you know, incentives or payments that were given to favored players domestically, and those could be challenged. But you know, we're now talking about a kind of hugely kind of economy-wide set of policies, you know, starting in places like China, which really was not envisaged in the original founding of the WTO system. And I think, you know, we just got a fundamental problem that we're dealing with, something that is on a much bigger scale, much broader spread, and doesn't have some important distinctions about different types of subsidies. Some are better than others, and so there's a lot of work to be done in that area. But maybe we can talk more about that as we move forward. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Actually, the subsidy questions is quite complex issues, and we could not complete this discussion right now. Just we can hand it over to the Q&A session if you would have further discussions. Ambassador Lee.
Ambassador Choi, to alleviate your work, your burden, let me try to very short. Korea is one of those countries that benefited the most from the multilateral trading system and WTO, which promotes the global free trade. And over the recent decades, the government in Korea also consistently developed the vast network of FTA to complement the MTNs. So Korea is the country that has the stake larger than any other country in making WTO properly function. But unfortunately, that is not the case, and which is, I think, very worrisome. And of course, at the root of this situation lies the hegemonic competition between United States and China, and economic security has emerged as a kind of concept for each of the countries to consider in conducting trade and investment. WTO by nature is not, does not include actually the mindset that put this security at the same footing as a trade. So in order to have a relevance on the part of WTO, I think WTO should go through kind of paradigm shift in its rule and structure. But unfortunately, in Geneva, of course, currently reform measures as well as the normalization of the dispute settlement system is underway ahead of MC13, which will be held next year, February. But the discussions are very limited and also very painfully slow, and focusing not the overall picture, but kind of specific, reform measures by saying reform by doing, which to me at least seem to be based upon the incrementalism rather than paradigm shift. And two topics: one, obviously, subsidy issues, which is very, very problematic, and previously, of course, non-market economy of China, had a problematic in this area, but now major countries like United States and EU also conduct the huge amount of the subsidies. So it is afraid that kind of a race to the bottom can take place. So this is the area where actually discussion should be undertaken, but unfortunately little discussion has been done about this issue. I think US and EU should exercise the political leadership in pushing forward with this reform of the subsidy issues. And also the normalization of this resettlement system, that is the area also we need leadership from the EU and the United States. As far as Korea is concerned, of course, Korea always has tendency to support the consensus that may emerge on the important issues. So sometimes Korea has tendency to be taken for granted, in pushing forward with the important agenda in the WTO. But anyway, Korea can become a good partner in moving forward with these issues together with EU and the United States, and we are very much looking forward to have a positive result, not only early next year, but also the end of next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the valuable comments and also within allowed time frame. Without further ado, I just move over to the second topic, which is supply chain resilience questions. There are many elements giving influence to the supply chains. Geopolitics, such as Ukraine war and the pandemic, and also the globalization itself intensified interdependency of the global economy. This in turn exposed vulnerabilities of the global supply chains, and also the asymmetric character of the interdependence may have been used and misused to apply economic coercion by certain countries. Now, the so-called weaponization of interdependence, in other words, weaponized interdependence, actually the scholars are talking about the weaponized interdependence, has become a new reality in the global trade environment. Now my question, economic security has become an integral part of national security interest of every country at the moment. Are there credible response strategy or policies to prevent or counter the economic coercion if it would occur? And may I also ask actually specific experience in the EU and United States and Korea in this area? And actually, so far as I know, EU has adopted anti-coercion instrument several months back. And can this initiative be emulated in Asia-Pacific areas? This is my question. And also how this Trilateral can promote to counter this anti-coercion initiatives. Thank you. Now I just would like to ask Matthew to take the lead.
Well, there are a lot of important issues in that under this heading, and I think there's no question that the de-risking, not just vis-a-vis China, but sort of making our global supply chains more resilient is something that everybody has an interest in. The pandemic alone, showed us how vulnerable we were to having too much concentration in one place. I think the issue of coercion is, and I guess the point I want to make about that is, I think it's clear we need to, risk has increased, and when risks increase in your life, what do? You buy more insurance, or you put stronger locks on your door, or get a new alarm system, but two things about that. One, it costs something to do that, to buy that, pay that extra premium costs something. and it comes at the expense of other things that you want to do. And so I think we need to be a little more honest again about the trade-offs involved in some of these issues and decide, and have better kind of criteria for determining at what point we have actually done where we need to cut off risk completely, where we need to mitigate it, and then after having done those things, we should just let things go, let activity continue. I think we're in sort of a mode of locking down, shutting down things, which is appropriate, but at what cost? And at what point do we need to start, kind of thinking about the affirmative economic activity that we're chilling through this activity and measuring that. So that's that point. On coercion, I mean, this is about China, I think, first and foremost, and China's been a serial economic coercer for longer than this recent set of issues around supply chains have since they've emerged. We did a study at my old think tank of this that was released in March of this year and showed that there's been a pattern that China's pursued for many years in Korea. Koreans know better than anyone what that means. It's different from the weaponized interdependence that others may be pursuing. If the illusion, which it often is to what the U.S. is doing in export controls or sanctions or other things. I mean, the big difference is that those things are done transparently and by the rule of law, whereas China's coercion is done non-transparently and, well, often the effects are transparent, but the way they do it is not justified or rationalized, certainly based on a rule-based system. So it's more problematic. On the other hand, it's fairly light touch. It has a big impact on individual companies like, department store, supermarket companies in certain countries. But at a national level, it doesn't have a huge macroeconomic impact. Historically, that's what we have found. The interesting thing is whether some of these new measures, like on the 3Gs, I love that, by the way, I had not heard that before, the gallium, germanium, and graphite, which is a sort of different thing because that China typically has not used its restrictions on its export side. It's been more on denying access to its market. So that's interesting. If that turns into something bigger, I may reevaluate my view of this, but in general, based on our study, this coercion was relatively low level, and we shouldn't overreact. Retaliating is going to maybe be satisfying to us on some level, but it may or may not, it probably won't solve the problem, and it's going to come at a cost to us. And so we need to think about that. We propose two other R's, not retaliation, but relief and, resilience and relief, helping our partners get more resilient, have alternative markets. Just recently, as China has been coercing Japan over the release of the nuclear material into the waters and has been blocking Japanese seafood, the U.S. has announced, bulk purchases of Japanese seafood. That kind of thing, we should have done that in the THAAD case. That kind of thing is more useful. Negotiating free trade agreements is a part of that resilience effort, and we should be doing that too, and we'll come back to that, I think. Again, I have a contrarian view to the general mood in Washington on that issue. And then relief where people, are actually coerced. So there's a lot here. I think the European development is very interesting, and I think it might, the U.S. has a couple of pieces of legislation pending right now in Congress in both houses that are sort of trying to do something similar to the EU anti-coercion instrument, and it'll be interesting to see how that develops. The G7 has obviously made a strong statement about this as well.
Okay, Christoph.
Ambassador, thank you. Sorry, I thought that.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
No problem.
I have two hands.
Yes, so the de-risking that was mentioned, indeed. So that's the new mantra adopted in the G7 summit in Hiroshima. De-risking, not decoupling. We are all very familiar with this. I I mentioned the EU economic security policy, protect, that's one of our 3 Ps. Indeed, the EU, like Korea, like Japan, has experienced also economic coercion from China. Lithuania, there was an issue with the representation office of Taiwan in Vilnius, and there was an ensuing trade embargo by China. Sweden, with graphite, is also experiencing some form of economic coercion. So, I mean, drawing on these experiences, we have indeed developed in the EU a specific legislation on anti-coercion. I will try to summarize for you the main elements of this instrument. So the first objective is deterrence. I mean, the best instrument is an instrument that we don't use. Then dialogue, if deterrence is not sufficient, and then ultimately countermeasures. So the credibility of the instrument lies actually in these countermeasures that the EU will be in a position to impose. It's very broad. If you look at our legislation, it can be about trade, it can be about investment, it can be about procurement. So we remain vague, and that's the purpose of this legislation, on the threat that we can impose on the coercer. The definition of coercion, you will see, also it's very broad. It's defined as a situation where a third country is seeking to pressure the EU or a member state into making a choice by applying or threatening to apply measures affecting trade and investment. So I think it's difficult to have a definition that is broader than this one. ACI, so our instrument is country agnostic. It does not target any particular country. And you're right, the entry into force is for December, so next month. So this is indeed very timely. Maybe, if you allow me, one or two remarks also concerning the trilateral framework and the parameters. I was wondering, when I was thinking about this conference, the questions, preparing for that, I was wondering what is Korea's objective with this trilateral cooperation, this plea for a trilateral cooperation. Maybe your question is interesting because is Korea seeking a sort of collective assurance to counter coercion? I don't know. Maybe you will tell us. I mean, our next panelist will tell us if Korea is developing an anti-coercion instrument. I know that Japan is developing an anti-coercion instrument. It has been mentioned also by Matthew, there is the coordination platform in the G7 on anti-coercion, on economic coercion. But of course, Korea is not in the G7. But I think there is a plan also amongst the G7 members to reach out to non-G7 countries and maybe in the future to extend this collective assurance to non-G7 countries. So there are a few leads that I wanted to lay on the ground.
Can I just say something in response? I know you
Yes, please.
try to keep on time, which is a very noble thing for the moderator to do, and I hate to interrupt, but I think Christoph said two things that are very interesting, starting with the latter one. I have the same question. What does Korea want us to do about economic coercion? So please help give us a sense of that. On the first thing that he said that was interesting to me is in developing their anti-coercion instrument and having a very broad definition, to leave it to a case-by-case determination with the member states able to veto that effectively if they don't think it is coercion that needs a response. I mean, there's a constitutional battle that went on in Europe behind the scenes because the big countries didn't want to have to bail out the little countries every time they did something irresponsible, like putting Taiwan's name on the door of an office in the capital city. And so the point about that is it's important, and I think as the US or other countries develop this, we ought to keep that definition broad and sort of decide when coercion is something we need to respond to or not. It's also instructive because you know, again, a lot of this behavior by China is really problematic for the rules-based order, but it is not that damaging to our macroeconomies, and therefore, it hasn't been, I should say. It might change, but they have had a very low tolerance for pain themselves when they impose these costs, and so we need to bear that in mind. It's different from nuclear deterrence. And therefore, you know, we need to be thinking about tools in a different way, and that's why we're emphasizing not tit-for-tat retaliation, but resilience and relief as really the response. Doesn't mean once in a while we shouldn't, you know, leave a horse head in China's bed to remind them what we can do. Sorry, that's a movie metaphor that might be moved past people. But I think in general, you know, the answer is to stay calm and to you know, to try to diversify our trading patterns and provide relief to partners that are affected. But I'm really interested in the Korean view of all this.
Actually, the issue is actually it has a multifaceted implications. For example, Chinese economic coercion, to the perspective of the United States, it may not be that much significant, but Chinese economic coercion is targeting US allies and partners individually. It's kind of divide and conquer strategies. Therefore, affecting US allies and partners are feeling much more significantly than expected. I mean, this is a relative concept, therefore, we may further discuss on this matter later on. I just would like to give floor to Ambassador Lee.
Thank you, Ambassador Choi. Decoupling and de-risking, the arguments has been there, but you know, now I think there is some degree of understanding, you know, what courses should be taken in dealing with country's relationship with China. The world has gone through the rapid globalization process of the past several decades, so it is almost impossible, you know, for the countries to completely cut off their economic interactions with China. I think we have gone too far and too long, you know, to completely reverse our economic relations with China. From that perspective, actually, you know, we have to live with the reality where, as you said, that asymmetric the interdependence, you know, could be weaponized, and Korea has an experience, of course, in suffering from China's economic coercion. So I think we consider this issue very important. And from that perspective, you know, then the question is what should be done in order to deal with this contingency. And one obvious answer is to reorganize the global supply chains so that that chain enables the countries, you know, to be less dependent on China in terms of sources and markets and production as well. That's one solution, of course, and I think that is being done, you know, by many countries now. And the second solution is what we have been discussing at this stage, you know, how to collectively respond effectively to any disruption, you know, in the supply chain, natural disruption as well as the situation which is created by a certain country for purpose. And you know, this is kind of as what we heard, you know, collective deterrence or collective assurances or whatever you call it. But I think this is important, how to make the existing or reorganize the global supply chain more resilient against the contingency to be created by nature or by other countries, and how to construct the collective resilience strategy. That's, I think, a big issue. Once it is done, I think that could discourage potential actors from disrupting, this chain for political purpose, other non-economic purpose. So I think in this respect, although Korea is not a part of G7 process, but Korea has joined the IPEP supply chain agreement, and I think exactly this is this framework has a purpose, to provide a kind of collective resilience against the possible disruption in the global supply chain. And I think this is a landmark arrangement. Of course, it is to be seen, how effectively it will work eventually in order to deal with this eventuality. But I think the very fact that this kind of mechanism has been agreed upon by, 14 countries, including United States and Korea, will discourage the potential disruptor from using the global supply chain for political purpose. And on the part of EU, I think Indo-Pacific strategy is also important, major important policy direction for EU. And also EU has its own instrument, in order to deal with, aimed at dealing with this issue. So I think there is some kind of foundation for three of us to work together, to deal with this issue. And particularly Korea shares democracy and market economy, and also Korea is very well connected with the countries around the world through the expanded FTA networks, and also it has a leading position in the high-tech areas, semiconductor and batteries. So Korea, I think, can be a good partner in constructing the resilient and safe global supply chain. And in fact, Korea has been conducting bilateral basis, the supply chain dialogue with the United States and EU. I think those processes are very important, in pursuing this goal. And at the same time, of course, Korea wants to be also to be heard, in the process of US and EU making domestic policy in dealing with this issue as well. Thank you.
Okay. Now we just move over to final agenda item, actually, which is how we could promote trilateral cooperation between US, EU, and Korea. Korea, EU, US have a common, actually we share common values of democracy, market system, and also human rights protections. And we have also high quality FTA. Korea has high quality FTA with the European Union and United States. And as such, we have some commonalities in trade issues. And Korea, EU, US are actually adamant supporter for multilateralism. We are a proud member of the WTO, WTO, and also we are working together in OECD and G20 and then other areas. And also US and EU has worked for TTIP, which failed to achieve agreement in the past, but you are discussing TTC. Actually, we have a great hope, actually, US and EU would reach agreement on this negotiation as early as possible. With that in mind, how, actually, whether and how the trilateral can agree the form of institutional the cooperation mechanism, and also the topics for the discussion. Just Christopher mentioned whether the weaponization, the global supply chain issue in the context of weaponized interdependence could also be a topic for the coordination or discussions. And lastly, just as Ambassador Lee just mentioned, IPEF, Korea joined IPEF, which is the US initiative, and Korea also joined Mineral Security Partnership, which is a kind of collective response to the potential weaponization of interdependence. My question is whether those existing instruments is sufficient to counter the weaponization of interdependence. This is our final topic. Therefore, actually, the panelists can feel free to discuss whatever issues, actually. Thank you. Ambassador Lee first.
Finally. Thank you, Ambassador. As you pointed out, actually, Korea, and as many speakers also pointed out at the beginning of this seminar, Korea has been in close consultation with the United States and EU on various issues, but bilaterally, on a bilateral basis. And Korea has FTAs with the United States and EU respectively, and various level of discussions has been undertaken, including the summit level and many ministerial talks as well. This year actually marks the 60th anniversary of Korea-EU relations and the 70th anniversary of Korea-US alliance. So our bilateral relations, not only in terms of trade, but also the other areas, including security, is at the very high stage of maturity. But unfortunately, we do not have a tri-party, three-party consultation body. I think given the varieties of issues, that has been discussed among three partners, separately, and also the intensity, their intensity. I think it would be very, very, very beneficial for three sides, could be put together and formally, and to consult those issues, particularly of global interest and concern. I think we have been already discussing these issues, on a bilateral basis, but I think we can put them together, and then we can discuss all these issues on a trilateral basis. I think Korea, given that Korea's standing in the international arena in trade issues, as well as the global supply chain, and also Korea's potential to advance the issues of global interest, I think this trilateral dialogue or body could be very beneficial for all of us. And of course, we don't have to put all these issues together at the same time, because this is the very beginning. So maybe we can focus on one or two specific issues at the beginning, so that we can expand gradually the topics we are going to discuss under these trilateral consultations. And one example, I was thinking, what could be the first item, practically. And I was thinking about the GSSA dialogue, which is being undertaken between United States and EU, because the mechanism which will be established by the two will eventually be applied to other major steel producing countries like China, Japan and Korea. So I thought that maybe during the process of setting up this arrangement, Korea could be given the opportunity to be heard about its position, so that later on the implementation stage, that could be smooth. And then based upon this kind of experience, I think slowly the the three countries, three parties could expand their subject for dialogue. So this is kind of initial thinking. But anyway, given the Korea's experience and Korea's position in the global arena, I think Korea could be a good partner for this dialogue. To be frank, maybe Korea could be more keen in the other two, but I think given the beneficial outcome, that could be obtained from this process, I think we can consider very seriously this idea.
Thank you. Actually, Ambassador Lee mentioned the GSSA, which is Global Sustainable Steel Arrangements. Actually, this now the US and EU is discussing very actively, but the outcome whatsoever would give far-reaching implications on Korea and Japan's steel industries. Just for your information. Christoph, followed by Matthew.
Thank you. So indeed, I will come back maybe to my fundamental question, which is what is the objective of the trilateral cooperation before talking about the setup, about the framework, whether we'll have working level meetings, high level meetings, ministerial meetings. We have to answer this fundamental question: what is the objective of the trilateral cooperation? For your information, we have, the EU has a trilateral conversation with Japan and with the US since 2017, but it's very limited in terms of scope. It's to discuss China's overcapacities, subsidies. So you see the scope is very narrow. Lately, the discussions have concerned semiconductors, for instance. So my question again to Korea is, do you want to discuss these kind of things with the EU and with the US? China, overcapacity, subsidies. From the EU side, when we agreed to set up this trilateral conversation with the US and with Japan, we had also in the back of our mind the idea to anchor the US in the WTO, in the multilateral system. You see, so don't repeat this to my US colleagues who are in the room, but that was the hidden agenda of the EU. You have to see that this trilateral cooperation on China's overcapacity, subsidies, and so on, as a kind of precursor or facilitator for WTO discussions. You know, there are WTO discussions also on subsidies, hopefully in the run-up to MC13. Okay. So yeah, once again, I think it's for Korea to clarify what is the intention of Korea for this. You mentioned the TTC, so maybe I can update you on this. Indeed, the TTC between the EU and the US was launched in June 2021, with the primary objective was to reboot the US-EU relationship. And indeed, the TTC has delivered concrete outcomes, like solving disputes, Airbus, Boeing, Section 232. You mentioned the GSA, so and the GSSA. Indeed, we hope to finalize this negotiation. We have a sort of a deadline before the end of the year, because otherwise the steel measures will be reimposed. So we have this final line that we want to cross, and I know our negotiators are very busy on this. We have maybe on the TTC, since you are interested, of course, also very good cooperation dialogue concerning Russia sanctions. We have also an expanded MRA on pharmaceuticals. This is more technical, but still important. And during the last TTC meeting in Sweden, there was an initiative on sustainable trade. So you see, it's very multifaceted, I would say. The areas of cooperation for the TTCs, very broad. Export controls, where actually we have a mixed competence between the EU and the member states. FDI screening, this is also something very important for us. We have an instrument for inbound FDI screening, but we are also reflecting on an instrument for outbound FDI. Secure supply chains, of course, very important, semiconductors, technical standards, AI, global trade challenges in general. That's what we discuss in the TTC. The next meeting, hopefully, before the end of the year. So that's what I wanted to tell you, to update you concerning the TTC.
Yes.
Before you give the floor to him, could I just quickly respond?
Okay, yes.
Yes, I think I'm not, of course, speaking on behalf of government anymore, but I think as far as Korea is concerned, I think the limited topics could be the starting point, for this trilateral dialogue. And then, as I said earlier, we can expand slowly the topics to be discussed at the trilateral dialogue.
Right, Ambassador, you don't need to worry about that because we have Deputy Minister Yang here. He already heard actually what he should do. Yeah? But you may get answer from him later on. Matthew?
Well, I have a simple institutional solution, which is that Korea should be invited to join the G7 along with Australia and make it a G9. I think the time has come for that, and both countries have shown the ability to contribute constructively to that forum. I feel very strongly that countries should not be invited to join if they just want to be a member of the club, but if they want to contribute and roll up their sleeves and work as Korea, I think, does, then I think that would help because all these things are being discussed in the G7. So I think that's the simple answer rather than creating something new. Just two other points. One is, next week we're going to see some outcomes from two forums that the U.S. and Korea participate in. The EU does not, but which are IPEF and APEC. And they're going to be overshadowed, unfortunately, by a lot of other things that are happening in the world and that will happen in San Francisco, including, it seems like, although it hasn't yet, I think, been announced, unless it happened overnight while I was flying here, that President Biden will be meeting with the Chinese President Xi. So those are going to dominate. But IPEF and APEC are going to do some useful things to advance shared norms around economic trade issues and related issues. They're not perfect, and in fact, that's really ultimately my point. They're useful but not sufficient. Certainly from a U.S. perspective, we need to be engaged in formal trade negotiations in this region, and among other things because then we get our Congress involved, and only when you get Congress involved do you get the ability of the United States to make the offers that incentivize people to respond with agreement to our preferred rules, and only Congress can make laws and make treaties or approve treaties, and that makes these arrangements permanent and dug in the soil. I think there's a high risk that IPEF is going to be an interesting chapter in future books by PhD students, but it's not going to be a real live thing in 2 or 3 years from now. I think there's a very high risk, whereas TPP is still going to be a thing. So final point, one final thing, it's a small thing, but it relates back to the WTO, small but critical, which is the United States decided a couple weeks ago to withdraw from an important part of the WTO digital negotiations, the e-commerce negotiations, the data. It's no longer going to push the idea of free cross-border data flows and no restrictions on no data localization requirements and so forth. I think this was a huge mistake by the United States in terms of its own interests, and I hope that it will be revisited, and I have reason to believe it might be because there's been such blowback to this. But I also think it's an area where the EU has been a leader in this area, for better or for worse, from a US perspective on data issues. But Korea has a lot to offer here as well, and I think that's an issue that, as long as the US is out of the game, EU and Korea need to push forward with our preferred or more preferable digital and data rules than the ones being offered by China. And I hope you will also encourage the United States to get back in this game. It's a huge mistake for the United States.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We just completed actually 3 topics of issues, the initial discussions. We have only around 5-6 minutes. We started the discussion a bit belatedly, but considering that, still we have 5-6 minutes. Now I just would like to open the floor and receive only the first round of questions and then ask panelists to respond. Any question? And also you bear in mind, we have a second session, which the topics of second session is not completely different from the first session. It's quite similar. Therefore, if you have any further comments or questions, you may feel free to do so in the second session. But if you have imminent questions in the first session, now the floor is open. If not, I would like to ask each panelist for a very short 1 minute final comments, starting from Christoph, Matthew, and then Wesley.
Final comment. I would like to thank you for organizing this. This is a very interesting and very timely discussion that we are having here. I think that by discussing and by hearing my co-panelists, I understood a little bit better what could be the contours of this trilateral cooperation. I think we have already quite a great deal of bilateral instruments and multilateral instruments to deal with the let's say the objectives or the concerns of the different parties. But as I said before, this is the decision to enter into a formalized trilateral cooperation is certainly above my pay grade. I don't think that it necessarily means that this would require a mandate from our member states, but it's definitely above my pay grade, and therefore this kind of gatherings, this kind of conferences are very useful, I think, to lay the ground, to put what are the objectives, what are the intentions of the different parties in order to move forward in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew?
Well, I'll try to move from a depressing last thought to a more hopeful one, which is that, I mean, I just think audiences outside the United States need to hear the truth that there is a lack of commitment right now in Washington to engaging on affirmative trade initiatives, and I don't think that's going to change in the near term. I did have some hope, like a lot of people, that maybe in the second half of the Biden administration, or when something magical happens, that this is going to change. But I don't think under any scenario after our next election, well, certainly running up to our next election, there's not going to be any forward-leaning trade movement. But I think afterwards, it's also not there's not a high prospect of this. So I just think that is a reality, and it's going to mean that the EU and Korea are going to have to row even harder while the U.S. is temporarily out of the game, because I still think, and this is the more hopeful thing, that U.S. participation, even leadership in affirmative trade initiatives is central to U.S. national interests, and like gravity, we will be pulled back into this eventually. And I think there's more support in the general public than there is in Washington for this kind of direction. So it's a question of, I think, trying to remind us of the value of these initiatives and being patient while we work through our politics.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think discussions were useful, and this is kind of a track 2 process, but I hope that in the near future, the government-to-government discussions on the similar subject could be held, and I think that could be very desirable. And also, I'm very much looking forward to the 3rd edition of this kind of conference in Brussels next year, regardless of whatever political change can take place, in next year. And also, I thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much. Actually, we have a number of subjects to discuss in the trilateral format, and all panelists agree that actually this format should be further promoted and further developed. And we are at the moment track 2, but we have one high-level officer from Moti side. So not necessarily completely track 2, actually. It's 1.9 or something like that, yeah? But I hope actually this trilateral format could be further developed with a 1.5 or 1.0 or 2.3 or something like that, yeah? I thank you very much for your attention. I just would like to stop our discussion. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the first session. After a short break, while we set up the seats, we will continue with our second session. Please be back here in 5 minutes for the next session. Thank you. Our second session, Cooperation on Economic Security, Technology, Digital Trade, Climate Change, and Energy will now begin. This session will be moderated by Ji-hyung Park, Professor of Seoul National University. Put your hands together for them.
Okay, so I'm Ji-hyung Park, just being introduced to moderate the session on cooperation on economic security, technology, digital trade, climate change, and energy. We have so many topics to cover. In fact, each one of this we need to discuss it over an hour. So my challenge is how to organize the specialists here, like 3 from KIEP, KIEP Lee, Jin Young-moon, and Won-ho-yan. Each one of them are specialists in some of these areas that we will cover. And we also have Chairperson Grace Oh from Swedish Chamber of Commerce, and Senior Director Troy Stan-Geron from KEI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of group this like 5 different topics into 3, and I will have a subset of the specialists to kind of discuss this kind of issues, and then maybe I will also open the floor for further discussion on these topics. Well, the previous session was kind of more general in the sense of what kinds of cooperation that Korea, EU, and US can have on this trade issue. And also, in the previous session, we're discussing how these three parties can cooperate for the challenges kind of posed by China. But however, the topics that we'll discuss also kind of have the challenges of including China. And also the technologies and the climate changes is really global issues. So we'll kind of having a slightly different kind of approaches or kind of questions in relation to this trilateral cooperation. And we all know, I guess, so especially the people in this room, that the multilateral trading system, the stable one, has provided ample opportunities for many emerging economies to actually integrate themselves into the global value chain and grow. Like great example is Korea. And also this global economy, well-functioning global economy, has really helped all the like kind of economic agent in all over the world to innovate because they can actually access to the global market. And all these like great things may actually be jeopardized because the stable, one stable global multilateral trading system is no longer really functioning very well. In fact, the like ongoing U.S.-China confrontation is really a big challenge for restabilizing the multilateral trading system. Nonetheless, the urgent need for international cooperation in addressing climate change and the pivotal role of technological progress, including potential contribution of digital transition in confronting the challenges of climate change and the potential energy crisis, are undeniable. So to talk about this issue, I will first discuss this climate change and energy issue as issue number one. And then for issue number two, we'll talk about economic security and technology together. And the last topic will be digital transformation and digital trade and how we can cooperate on these topics. For the first issue, while major industrial economies have set ambitious carbon neutrality goals, contentious issues persist in relation to policy measures aimed at mitigating climate change. These include the European Union's introduction of carbon border adjustment mechanism, so-called CBAM, and the equitable distribution of the burden of reducing greenhouse gas emissions between advanced and developing nations. As a major steel exporting nations, as one of the major steel exporting nations, South Korea is likely to harbor specific concerns about the EU's recent commencement of phase one of CBAM, and many countries may share similar concerns. And what are the primary concerns of the Korean government, potentially, and what steps can the EU may take to address these concerns? This is the first question, and maybe I will ask this question to first Dr. Jin-young Moon, and then maybe Chairperson Grace Oh may respond.
Good morning, everyone. It's my privilege to discuss the important issue for today's session. I am Jin-young Moon from KIEP. Actually, the CBM is starting from the European Green Deal. That's the kind of starting for the addressing global issue of how to reduce greenhouse gas. And then the EU start first suggests about the kind of the starting with the word of carbon neutrality. They are aiming that for the achieving the carbon neutrality by 2050, and then at the time the commissions proposed the carbon border adjustment mechanism for selected sectors to reduce the risk of carbon leakage and put a price on the carbon emitted during the production of carbon-intensive goods in non-EU countries. They said this would ensure the price of imports reflect more accurately their carbon content, and this measure would be designed to comply with the WTO rules and other international obligations of the EU. From that kind of the position, we have pointed out two uncertainty. Is the how to measure the carbon content and then how to put the price relatively. That's the big issues. Anyhow, CBAM will initially cover the honorable specific product in some of the most carbon-intensive sector like iron and steel, cement, fertilizer, aluminum, electricity, and hydrogen. Also, indirect emissions would also be included in the regulation in a well-circumscribed manner. We don't know how it will be applied to well-circumscribed manner. And another concern be maybe some other sector could be expanded to the application of CBAM. Since the introduction of EU CBAM, Korean government has continuously requested the EU to design a system that comply with the WTO norm and recognize the carbon price already paid by Korean company and prohibit discrimination between companies within and outside the EU. And then recently, Korean Business and Trade Related Association have provided some suggestions to EU commissions. So let me just briefly explain their suggestion. First, they stress the protection of the confidential information from the third country operator. Recent implementing regulation of CBAM require a lot of kind of confidential information that cannot be shared with the reporting declarant by third country operator. And second, the Korean business expressed concerns some burdensome of reporting obligations. Since reporting declarants are obliged to report the large amount of information every quarter, this would impose unnecessary burden on companies. And third, they want clear guidance on applying calculation method in third country. Korean company already calculate the embedded emission based on the methodology on the Korean emissions trading system. And they want commissions to clarify that the Korean company could calculate the embedded emissions based on the methodology under the Korean emissions trading system during the transitional period. And lastly, they also suggest the commissions to either entirely abolish the penalty during the transitional period or alternatively to provide clear guidance for calculating the penalty. It's my own.
Thank you for your answer to this question. It looks like Korean companies and the government have pretty serious concern about the introduction of CBAM by EU in terms of how to measure the carbon contents and how to price them, and that is also involved revelation of confidential information by the private sector companies. And also, from the company's point of view, it looks like the Korean emission trading system can be kind of having the recognition in the transition period by the EU. Some specific kind of suggestions are being made, I guess. So please, what would be the potential response by the EU? Can please, Grace So, please respond.
Thank you. I represent the Swedish Chamber of Commerce in Korea and also Tetra Pak, which is a world-leading food processing and packaging solutions company. So that would be where my perspectives would come from. I think I probably am not in the right position to answer for EU. I think we have Christoph for that. But what I can do is maybe answer on behalf of our member companies, and we have about 130 Swedish companies operating in Korea. So the challenges that we face on a daily basis are requiring us to collaborate, draw our experiences and expertise from one another, especially as we navigate the challenges, as you mentioned, and CBAM is one of them. As the moderator has mentioned, global cooperation to address the climate change is absolutely key. I mean, it is so simple, it seems so obvious, yet this is something that is very hard to do. And I think the first session talked about it from a country level, from a government to government perspective. Now, from a company perspective, this is absolutely key. In order to drive the ambitious carbon neutrality targets. Economies have set carbon neutrality targets. I think when we hit 2020, economies and companies, in some ways very competitively started to announce the carbon neutrality targets, whether it is achieving carbon neutrality in own operations by 2030, or it is by across the whole value chain by 2050, as an example. We don't think that it's a good thing that companies and economies are competitively setting targets, because that is indeed the right path that we need to take. In order to support us to achieve the carbon neutrality in the private sector, in 2021, Swedish companies in Korea, or companies with Swedish origin, we have to be very specific about that, formed what is called the Sweden plus Korea Green Transition Alliance. And the purpose of the alliance is to have concrete action plans in order to achieve carbon neutrality. And it is actually the first time for foreign companies to come together in this manner. What we realized from the beginning is that companies and industries have very different concerns and challenges. But another factor that we realize is the commonality that we all share across the alliance, in that the time frame and the challenges, I mean, at the moment it could be CBAM, but it could, we are always faced with a variety of challenges, whether it is externally driven or internally motivated. But we realize that although the time frame may be different, the journey is the same. And so we realized that we need to really look at what are the commonalities, what are the positives that we can draw from, because if we look at or only focus on the challenges, we will never be able to solve this issue. And that is the intent of the Sweden plus Korea. The plus is very important. It also is a bit of a side thing, but it embodies what Sweden stands for, the spirit of collaboration, which the moderator also mentioned is absolutely critical. When it comes to EU, European, Swedish companies working in Korea, we believe that these global organizations are key to achieving the global corporations, which I earlier mentioned is key, very necessary, very obvious, but very difficult to do. And perhaps what we are able to do is maybe take a step back and work with Korean government, Korean customers, NGOs, academia as an example, to maybe look at the bigger picture when it comes to sustainability, because we're very much driven by very specific issues that are in front of us, whereas we need to take much more of a holistic look and an approach, whether it is looking at product life cycle, working on a solution to calculate carbon emissions of a set product in its life cycle journey, or whether it is to look at what methodologies and calculation models are there for carbon emission calculation across the value chain. And this is something that global companies with a global network and presence can contribute.
Thanks for your response. And Graco has emphasized the potential role that multinational corporations, including Swedish companies, may actually play in developing some of the rules to measure the carbon emissions in the complex global value chain. But at the same time, I kind of have my own kind of question about like the question that was initially raised. It seems that the EU is trying to kind of develop the system to measure the carbon emissions and how to control them in their own ways and through and in a way not necessarily that was the intention, but by the implementation of the CBAM starting kind of just a few weeks ago in phase 1, and it'll actually go through and countries may not totally agree on how to measure the carbon emissions and how to price them, and I wonder whether there is some like kind of trilateral or even higher level corporations or to coordinate these issues, because this is going to be the very important issue in the future, how to have a globally accepted kind of norm to measure the carbon emissions and how to price them in relation with the application of the CBAM. And it looks like potentially the right person to answer this question might be not on the panel, but on the floor. May I actually take the freedom of asking this question to Christopher Bess? Any?
Yes, thank you very much. CBAM, yes, this is definitely an issue that has been on the table in Korea for quite a number of years. Of course, we have to frame it in the global warming is a challenge that is imposing to all of us. I mean, we have to start from there. And we have developed the CBAM instrument in the EU. Indeed, we are very innovative very often with our regulations. I know very much that there are concerns. I've been discussing with POSCO so many times over the last 2 years here in Korea. A couple of remarks. First, indeed, the CBAM entered into force very recently, but the first phase is just about reporting. Okay, so it's just about reporting. There will be no payment of a tax. I call it a tax. Actually, to be more precise, it's the payment of allowances. It's CO2 emissions allowances that the emitter has to purchase. But let's call it a tax to make it simple. So the payment of the tax actually will be very gradual and will kick in only from 2026. So you see there is really a lot of time to adjust first this reporting phase and then to adjust to understand how this is going to work in practice. And the last thing that I would like to mention is that it's very timely actually, because next week we have the visit of a very high level official. Maybe you are aware, vice minister level, the DG of DG TaxSud, which is in charge actually of the implementation of the CBAM, Mr. Gerasimos Thomas, is visiting Korea precisely with a number of colleagues, and we are in contact with MOTI, We are in contact with KCCI, KOTRA, KITA, and all the business organizations of Korea in order to maximize, let's say, the outreach of this high-level official. And he will come precisely to Korea to reach out and to explain better, so to address the kind of questions that you have about the reporting of this tax. So please take advantage of his visit next week.
Thanks a lot for your response, and so I will let me continue. In fact, I have like some other questions in my mind, but I will kind of restrain myself and move on. And this is another very important question, I think. So that is to really like fight like this climate change. We not only need the collaboration between advanced nations, we really need participation by emerging economies, especially China. And like, of course, China has actually committed like herself that they will achieve carbon neutrality by some time, and ambitious goal by themselves. But like the issue, I think, is pretty important that other advanced nations, how to kind of cooperate with China or include China in this kind of fight against the climate change. And for this issue, may I ask your view on, like Troy, your view on this, how to include China in this?
Thank you, and thank you to everybody at KIEP who helped organize this. We're really happy to work with you again this year and with Ramon. You know, I think this is an important question because when we talk about climate change, everyone looks at the United States and says, well, the U.S. is the world's historical largest emitter. You have, you know, a historic responsibility to take and address this. And factually, that's true that the United States is the largest emitter historically. And the EU 28 is the world's second largest emitter historically. But what often gets left out of this is that China is the world's third largest historical emitter. And when we look at emissions in the United States and the EU 28, those are on downward trajectories. Even with the Trump administration in place, they were on a downward trajectory in the United States, which I think says a lot. But China, emissions are still rising. China's plan is around 2030 to take and perhaps have emissions peak. But the reality is China's still building more coal power plants. So getting China to a point to where they're more involved, where they're addressing not only their own emissions, but also helping around the world, I think is going to be a key part of resolving this issue. And so I want to go through a couple quick things that I think we can do either trilaterally to address this issue or with China and some other developing countries. So first off, I think we need to realize the context of what we're sitting in. The Paris Accords report card, the initial one, came out recently, and the world is on trajectory to reach 2.5 centigrade above pre-industrial revolution temperatures by 2100. Our target is 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we are off on our target by 1 degree. That has significant consequences in terms of increased storms, more dangerous weather, and other types of things such as drought. Now, when we think about this, one of the key parts is the transition to electric vehicles, an area where obviously Hyundai and Kia are very strong. You have a strong transition in the United States with Tesla and some other companies. But when we look at China, who's going to play a role in this, there are a lot of questions about, and former Vice Minister Lee talked about this earlier, the subsidy issue, and this is something we need to tackle. There's an FT report recently that each NIO vehicle, which is a Chinese EV company, receives from state and local and regional governments a total of about $32,000 in subsidies. There's just no way that any car maker in the world could compete against another maker who's getting $32,000 in subsidies. Now, obviously there's been concerns about the subsidies in the Inflation Reduction Act, but I mean these go well beyond that issue, and those go specifically to that company for its production. Now, some Chinese companies such as BYD are much more efficient and don't get nearly that level of subsidies. But we need to have conversations about what is a realistic balance in terms of subsidies, because to get to the scale we're going to need on climate change, subsidies will likely be a part of this process, but we need to have common understandings. And so coming to an agreement amongst the United States, Korea, and the EU on what is perhaps acceptable subsidies for this industry, and then working with China to take and meet those types of standards is going to be an important part of this. Also, in terms of other countries in the world, one of the ways we go about this is looking at what our development finance corporations can do. And even in Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy, it talks about how there's a need for a transition because of the war in Ukraine and how it's disrupted energy markets within the region to try and bring energy security and to address climate change. And so when we look at how to go about doing this, we should be coordinating our efforts, in terms of what our development finance corporations are doing and how can they complement each other. And so some of this will be looking at what are the quickest deployable assets. I know there's a strong push in South Korea for small modular reactors, and they're going to play an important part in the long term in terms of, base power maintenance. But we can deploy wind and solar and these types of things much more quickly. And so how do we move those out while we finish the tech on small modular reactors and deploy those then? When you look at the issue of critical minerals, a lot of these countries, Indonesia is one that specifically, they don't want to go through the process you've seen in the past where you have resource extraction, there's no development locally. So how do we take and work with our companies and work together? And you could even bring China to this because China has a lot of investment in Indonesia in terms of taking and developing some of the, not just reprocessing, but the battery manufacturing in Indonesia. So that way it's able to take and grow as well and transition at the same time domestically. So, marrying these different parts of the green transition together are going to be important. And then lastly, what I'd say is there's something that I don't believe the EU specifically is doing this, but it's primarily the United States and a lot of the European countries. It's called the Just Energy Transition Partnership. They've been trying to take and get Korea to become involved in this. Korea so far has been reluctant. But I think whether it's through just specific European countries or the EU together, working, because one of these is in Indonesia, if I remember correctly as well, governments to develop a plan for how you transition, how it's financed in a way that is sustainable and that is just, and where you're having cooperation from the developed world. I think this is another way that we can all specifically work together on a trilateral basis to address climate change. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Like Troy has actually brought many interesting views into this discussion. Like for example, subsidy issue can be potentially even the U.S., for example, has developed its own subsidy plan for the kind of green transition, but also like China has their own kind of very aggressive subsidy plans on certain industries, and that might actually help for those kinds of transitions, but at the same time, it's also may actually affect the kind of market competition system. So this areas of fighting the climate change involves many different kind of complex issues together, because you need those kinds of subsidies or like a government policy helps to speed up those green transitions, but at the same time, this may actually also affect how the market economy operates. So this actually raises the kinds of important issues to address and potentially collectively by the countries involved, and the proper kind of the rules need to be developed to deal with these issues together. And also the initiatives by various participants of this system, right, can be the companies and so on, need to be kind of pulled together to address these issues. And I just before I kind of close up this the discussion on the climate change and energy issue, I wonder whether other panelists have any things to say or add on this issue. It's okay? Okay, sure.
I think you talked about subsidies, and I think I just want to build on what the director is saying. Because when we look at the issue of climate change, we realize that there are different challenges at hand. And again, going back to my earlier point, that cooperation with global companies in a deep dialogue in building the strategies would be absolutely critical. And again, I think maybe an ask to EU, to Christoph, would be whenever we have these high-level visitors and discussions, and I do realize that you have been in deep discussions with private sector, but again, I think the network of global players in Korea would be key to making sure that the strategies and the directions that we set reflect the challenges and realities of the companies in Korea. I think one thing maybe to add, maybe on a positive note, because sometimes this can be a very draining subject, and I think Director talked about the Paris Agreement, and we have COP28 that is upcoming, which addresses actually, it is where both developed and developing countries get together, so that could be an important forum, or forums such as that, to discuss ways to fight against climate change together. And one example, if I talk from Tetra Pak perspective, is that we're going to launch a series of commitments related to food systems transformation, because for the first time in COP, food systems agenda has been placed on the central table at the climate COP for the first time. And so we talked about subsidies, but I also want to talk about innovation that enables transformation into a green, especially in green transition, to help customers, to help big brand name players to optimize their food production facilities. I think you've all heard of the statistics that a third of all food we produce is wasted around the world. And that just cannot happen. It is unacceptable. So ensuring that we have innovations to support our industries to make that change into green transition is absolutely key. And again, another ask is to involve us in your discussions, especially when we are talking, across the countries and across the industries. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your comment. So let's actually, given the time constraint, let's move on to the next topic. Next topic is also very important, and this is going to be about economic security and technology. And as just like Carol has mentioned, I'm sorry, even to fight global climate change, technological progress is very important. That might be the most important factor in really dealing with this issue in the future. And the global technological development is going to play a key role. And in a way, the issue of this economic security and global innovative activities may actually not necessarily go in hand. So how we can actually overcome these issues of economic security and at the same time continue to promote the technological development in various areas is going to be the main topic of this second issue of economic security and technology. So the notion of economic security has emerged as a critical factor in stabilizing the volatile global trading system. This concern is closely intertwined with the ongoing confrontation between the US and China over technological kind of dominance in strategic industries, including artificial intelligence and related computer chips. And this is the question. How can nations prevent economic security concerns from entirely destabilizing the global trading system? And what roles can South Korea, US, and the European Union play in this regard? And this question will go to, I guess, first, Dr. Won-ho Yan, yeah, please.
Yes, So if there is a one word to describe the goal of economic security policy in major countries, probably it is de-risking. And de-risking can be literally be defined as reducing the probability of exposure to risk. So having said that, de-risking is not just a goal for certain countries, but for all countries, including China. And Ambassador Choi mentioned about paralyzed WTO. So in the absence of internationally agreed upon rules, more and more countries are basing their trade, investment, and cooperation on whether they can trust each other. So if you have many trusted friends, then you can diversify. If you do not have many trusted friends, then you should achieve like self-reliance. So the restructuring of supply chains based on trust is ultimately manifested in the fragmentation of global economy. So this year, IMF and WTO, they pointed out using the data, they showed there has been geoeconomic fragmentation ongoing. And it's like economic 101, like prisoner's dilemma. We all know what is the best for all, but the lack of trust lead us to the second best. So all these, IMF, WTO reports point out because of governments, they are trying to intentionally restructure their supply chains. It is unavoidable to face global welfare loss. So the question we should ask should be how to minimize the additional cost. Not only the US-China conflict or competition, but also green transformation, digital transformation, and the emphasis on ESG are all forcing companies to find the optimal cost rather than the minimum cost. And and also the rapidly changing global trade environment, the search for optimal costs actually can be confusing for companies. The core of the current, for example, the core of the current US-China policy, US-China strategy is small yard, high fence, right? And the problem for Korea is that many of our key industries overlap with the small yard selected by the United States. Also, EU has been emphasizing climate change issues and introducing measures such as CBAM. Koreans, we are quite concerned about whether that is purely for the climate change or that's another tool for kind of protectionism. So the different industrial and trade structure so each country has are causing differences. In the differences in perception of economic security risk and differences in specific de-risking measures. And then we have to ask that the question that our measures actually well coordinated to avoid harming allies or like-minded countries. And I think it is hard to say. As Ambassador Castillo mentioned earlier today, and many experts are saying that we need to restore rules-based order. But do we have a consensus on what rules those are? It would be great if the rules could be inclusive, such as WTO, but in the era of US-China strategic competition, I personally think this is a naive wish that is unlikely to be realized. So this situation highlights the importance of the unilateral cooperation, trilateral or bilateral cooperation. For example, Korea actually overcame, in 2019, Japan actually strengthened their export controls on semiconductor components against Korea. And we resolved this issue not through WTO, but through the normalization of bilateral relationship with Japan. Also, regarding the US export controls on Chinese semiconductor industry, Korea actually received an indefinite exemption through the VUB program, which was a result of bilateral negotiations between the two governments. So I think the next step is probably to broaden the framework of cooperation a bit wider, such as US, EU, Korea trilateral kind of framework, or the US, Japan, Korea trilateral framework. So if we accept that the days of a one-size-fits-all solution, such as WTO, are over, we should start by considering what is feasible. And I believe that countries in a trust-based bloc should at least start by discussing new rules to minimize the damage caused by each other's policies. So my last maybe comment is related to Christoph's comment. So objective of trilateral cooperation. You mentioned about 2017, you started trilateral talks with US and Japan, and that trilateral talks only focuses on China's subsidies, China's overcapacities and other things. But I think our kind of trilateral framework should focus on our subsidies, our climate change policies, our prospect for overcapacity, and also our economic security policies. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your opinion on this issue. First of all, Dr. Yun's actually point is, given these prisoner dilemma situations, it will be very hard to achieve the really, truly multilateral kind of system to operate in this current situation, and we probably need to kind of go for the second best, and that will be, instead of just having a bilateral, small kind of a framework to overcome these issues, we probably want to go for even bigger, more coordinated effort among the kind of like-minded, relatively like-minded nations, even though we might have different views on different issues, and also looking at the internal issues rather than just of these like-minded countries, because the subsidy issues and other industrial policy issues can be the involved countries may have different views on different issues. So coordinating on those issues can be challenging and also very important for further development and potentially achieving the second best. And I like to have some other views on these issues, potentially by Troy.
Yeah, I'll just try to be very brief. And I agree with what Dr. Yan said about trying to minimize the risks and the impact on market activities. But I also want to build off, both, I guess, his and Christoph's comments on, what does trilateral cooperation look like? And, I want to, in that context, also build off what my boss, Ambassador Stevens, said early on in her, welcoming remarks, which is that, we live in a different world. You can't take and look at economic issues or trade issues in a regional context anymore. And so, one of the things that's baffled me, to be honest, is the U.S. Ships 4 initiative, which is this sort of, East Asian semiconductor cooperation mechanism. It's like, well, how do you coordinate on semiconductors without the European Union? I mean, ASML is a key player in all of this. So we need to be thinking about what are the technologies, what are the policies we want to achieve, and who are the primary players. And if you look at Korea, the United States, and the European Union, there's a lot of areas in semiconductors and climate change technology and other things where there is overlap. Steel has been mentioned because all three are major steel producers. So how do we come together and have, as Dr. Yana said, basically a forward-looking, positive way of coordinating to take and try and address these issues and other ones that are of common interest to all of us. And I think in that context, I'll give you a specific example of why that's important. The October 7 semiconductor rules put in place last year by the United States, which we've heard about how Korea now has the verified end user waiver, which has helped to address all the issues. Part of this all came about because when those rules were put in place, there wasn't a realization on the US side that if the parts of the rules in terms of, for example, how companies who provide support to the equipment in country in China for the firms, that they would have to leave if you were producing advanced chips, would impact Samsung and SK Hynix. And so if we were having deeper conversations about these things, these are the kind of things that might have been shaped differently to address them up front rather than sort of having to resolve on the back end. So that doesn't mean, for example, you know, the U.S. isn't maybe at times going to go forward on regulations that perhaps the European Union, Korea, and others won't like. But if we're at least coordinating beforehand to try and talk, we can try to address some of these issues on the front side rather than the back end. And another reason why this is important is, you know, a lot of these things, and I think people don't realize, because I was looking at this in preparation for this conference, you know, there are provisions, for example, within the Wassenaar Agreement on dealing with dual-use goods and specifically parts of the semiconductor supply chain. The Wassenaar Agreement right now, because of basically Russia's stance and other things, is in essence basically frozen. And so if we're not going to be able to take and use existing mechanisms to deal with these kinds of things, we need to be working more closely trilaterally to try and address these issues, which ultimately are of common concern because, you know, the reality is, you know, the reason why the United States is doing these restrictions is that there are real national security implications to the advancement of artificial intelligence for military technologies within China, and those have obviously clear impacts on all of our national security. And so I think we need to try and minimize the market impacts, but we need to be cognizant of the real national security implications as well and how we best address those. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot for your opinion on this issue. This is one of the probably the most contentious and difficult issues to deal with. But like to really fight against the climate changes and many other issues, technological advancement, I guess, is fundamentally should play an important role. And like the current like measures like of export controls and or prohibition of kind of knowledge acquirement and all that may actually go against the technological progress at the global level, which actually, like for example, China is also playing an important role in technological advancement in many areas, and how we can, for example, we all kind of now understand the economic security concerns of many countries, including these 3 countries we talk about. But at the same time, we try to minimize the negative impact of having the security concerns to play a role in, especially in the technological progress in, for example, in green energies and so on, and how these 3 like trilateral cooperation may actually set some rules or some ways to find that so that the global technological progress can continue at least in some important areas. And I would like to get any views from you on this, from the panelists. Okay. Yeah.
Just briefly, again, I think maybe this is a suggestion not for 3 countries or regions, but for Korea. As we have seen from the U.S. effort or the EU's effort, like U.S., EU, there's a TTC, like U.S. have a TTIC with Taiwan. U.S. just launched, ICET with India. EU launched, also TTC with India this year, right? So I think Korea should more participate in this kind of bilateral, mini-lateral tech partnership dialogues. That's my kind of suggestion. Yeah.
Thanks. Maybe just one more comment on this.
Yeah, I think, this is something that we really need to discuss, amongst the United States, the European Union, Korea, and maybe bring in Japan and a few other countries, as well, because we, I think, need to settle on what we are comfortable with, and then as a group start talking with China and like, okay, where can we start drawing lines on what we're comfortable with? Because, it's always easy to say, if we allow China to be involved in certain things, that is going to have, national security implications, and that is negative. And there is a truth to that, but we also have to balance, I think Matt said this earlier, where do you put the line on the risk you can manage and everything? And so we need to, I think, first figure out what is the risk we can manage and live with. And then how do we take and work with China to take and develop rules of the road that are within that risk framework? And so that's what I would recommend. So more basically either trilateral or multilateral or minilateral discussions first. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Given the time constraint, I guess we have to move to the final issue, which is related to the digital transformation. The process of digital transformation actually started some time ago and is like posed to the accelerate with the rapid development and deployment of AI across all economic sectors. Despite the paramount importance of digital transformation, progress in establishing global regulations for digital trade has been relatively slow, and I just learned that U.S. has withdrew from the WTO discussion on this digital transformation or digital trade data-related issues. Substantial differences in opinion regarding the desirable rules for digital trade exist among South Korea, EU, and the United States. What are these differences, and how can we kind of overcome these potential differences and set the rules? I guess Dr. Kyun Lee may share your view.
Okay.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Q from KIEP. Actually, the questions raised by the moderator is extremely difficult. I really want to solve that question. It's an ongoing question, ongoing project. I really love to complete, but I don't have complete answers, but I want to share some ideas of how far I have been working on. I like to talk about digital trade rules that govern how we buy and sell goods and services online. Maybe some of you might be thinking that digital trade rules sounds like a bunch of technical stuff, a lot of jargon, boring rules, or maybe complex regulation that doesn't affect me. But let me assure you, these rules are really important. These rules are more than just a paperwork. Actually, they will shape our economy in ways that you might not realize, protecting our personal information, fostering innovation, and ensuring fair trade practices, and so on. Then still, you might, I want to say something like, hey, guys, there's no shortage of a disagreement on how to set these rules, right? But they're partly true, you're right. But just to take an example, look at the WTO e-commerce talk and its consolidated text released last August or July. Then you find easily there are different opinions on many provisions from the customs duties to data localization. Maybe in the previous session that you mentioned, of course, the moderator mentioned again, it might seem like there's north-south divide on these issues, but that's not always the case. For example, EU and US, two digital powerhouses have different views and philosophies on how data should flow across the countries. Like EU's GDPR reflects strong beliefs in privacy as a fundamental right, while the US takes the more flexible, laissez-faire approach. So let me just, the time is ticking, so I don't want to go a little bit further, but so let's go back to the question regarding the question that can we reach consensus on global digital trade rules for everybody? And my answer is, well, less likely in the short run, maybe in the long run. Honestly, I want to say myself, I'm a pessimistic optimist in this question. On the pessimistic side, I have to tell you, we face significant challenges, three of them. First, countries are at different stages of digital development. Each country has its own policy goals, leading to inevitable conflicts with the trading partners. Second, the pace of technological progress is so fast, but regulation find it more difficult to keep up, right? The third one, but not least, the digital trade and the new technologies and cybersecurities are intricately intertwined. Then what I mean by that, the ever-expanding scope of digital trade go beyond online transactions to encompass the very technologies that power digital trade, for example, AI technologies and the cloud computing facilities with 5G, with 6G network, and so on. There are numerous examples out there. These technologies, while transformative, come with a risk, like cybersecurity threats, privacy violation, and cybercrime, even powered by AI technology again, cloud computing facilities, 5G, 6G network, and so on. So I'm really worried about the potential conflict, the potential trade-off between efficiency and unintended consequences due to negative externality arising from the privacy and cybersecurity. And also I'm concerned about the cross-border spillover effects due to unilateral digital trade measures, in particular motivated by non-economic objectives such as national security. This topic connects to the previous speakers. But I really want to say, as I told you, I'm an optimist. Despite the short-term cost of establishing digital trade rules, we know they are crucial for digital trade and innovation in the long run, right? We've seen some progress, of course. EU, US, Korea, EU, and the Korea, US, bilaterally, EU, US have a TTC covering issues from AI to connectivity and digital infrastructure. EU and Korea have established the digital partnership and also have just agreed to initiate a negotiation on a digital trade agreement. And between the US and Korea, we have, the IPM Pillar 1, we're working on the collaborating on the digital economy. And I have just noticed that we have, the three of us, EU, US, Korea, we have TTC, unlike, and it's a slightly different version of a TTC between EU and US, we have a TTC, Trilateral Trade Cooperation. So these kind of platforms serve valuable tools for exchanging ideas and sharing the best practices and forging common ground in regulating digital trade. And I think that we are starting to approach digital trade and digital economy in a holistic view, recognizing the interconnectedness of trade, security, and technology. But we need to do more and go further. Probably EU, US, and Korea, three global leaders in digital economy, need to engage in open and honest dialogue about our differences and find common ground. Christopher, you are really popular in this. Already Dr. Yon cite you. I want to cite you again. And in the previous session, you mentioned objective. What's your objective? Our objective is to promote our digital economy. We want to join, maybe. And personally, if I am a member of the bureaucrat, I really push to join the EU-US TTC. Probably that means we need to broaden the scope of the discussion and raise the level of engagement. And that's the one thing, participating in a EU-US TTC. Deeper cooperation will pave the way of more productive, constructive discussions on digital trade, digital economy, digital trade rules at the G7, G20, and OECD levels, while simultaneously facilitating digital discussions through the forums like APEC. One thing I really want to remind you, Korea is serving as the APEC host in 2025. So I believe we have a lot of things to do together for the talks, and a deeper cooperation would ultimately contribute to lead to establishing globally harmonized digital trade rules that benefit all stakeholders, including governments alike, businesses and consumers, and you and me, I guess. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for sharing your view on this. In fact, you describe yourself as a pessimistic optimist, but you probably have to add one more thing: passionate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, it looks like we are really running out of time. But like I'm learning a lot actually from this sessions and the panelists, and also the values of trilateral communication and talks. But before we wrap this up, I'd like to get potentially one or two questions from the floor, and to the panelists here or the panelists in the first session. Before we, okay. So, yeah.
Thank you for the presentation of everyone. Dr. Moon, I have a question for you as well. And I'd like to put two and two together. We discussed technology, we discussed climate change, we discussed trade. But for climate change, my understanding is that the dialogue is mostly on carbon emission trade credits and all that. But we've seen in the past that these systems that the EU had leadership in did not succeed. So despite the hot weather and all that, where's your confidence that this will actually continue to work in the future as well? And I also want to point out that we also discussed technology as well. Why is there, where's this discussion on technology for climate change? Because I do remember like 5 or 6 years ago, there was discussion about bringing CO2 to create fuel. There's technology there available, but back then the costs were too high. I think a good idea is trilateral cooperation between investment and technology for climate change as well. Where is the discussion on that as well, and why is this absent and with the discussions? Thank you.
Please.
Yeah, frankly, that's a very difficult question, and then I also the same question to everybody about this. And also we have talked about the GASSA in the previous session. So maybe we need to find some common area that we can start from what we are facing now, and then maybe this kind of trilateral discussion involving various topics, as you mentioned, will be one of the way. I'm not sure about this. Is the answer your question directly. And then another, maybe speaking of your question, maybe I can talk about another issue. Maybe in the handling climate change issues, we have COP28 is coming soon, as the moderator mentioned. But the big challenge is the US and China is representing the portion of developed country and then developing country parties. So that's one of the ways Korea can contribute this negotiation is we try to be positions the kind of bridge, or recently the government said the green ladder between the developed country and then developing country. So we can maybe find a way to kind of all the issues is all the related with this climate change issue area, economic security, or other technological issue. Yeah, that's my own.
Thank you for the answer.
Okay, I think given the time constraint, I probably cannot take any more questions from the floor. But just very quick concluding remark by the panelists here? Like 1 minute max, or even less is better.
So I guess all I would say to conclude is, when we look at this going forward, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of issues where we have common interests and common challenges, and working together in a coordinated fashion will enhance the benefits for the United States, Korea, and the EU as a whole, rather than individually, to where individually we'll have suboptimal outcomes. That doesn't mean we're all going to agree, but I think by starting the conversation and trying to find ways to institutionalize that will benefit all three sides in the long run. Thank you.
Less than 1 minute. Yeah. I think I was recently asked a question from a running a business. What keeps you awake at night? And I think we talk about this a lot. What are the challenges, the common challenges that affect our member companies? And I said, without even thinking about it a lot, that is sustainability. It's the sustainability challenges that we have commonly across our member companies that keeps me awake at night, although I do sleep very well, by the way. But then I also said, but it's also what gets me up in the morning, because this is a topic, and we talked about all the challenges, and the challenges need to be tackled for sure, whether it is through agreements or technologies or advancements, etc. But it is something that I strongly believe that we are moving in the right direction. At least directionally, we are on the right path. So that's what gets me excited. Maybe not as passionate as our speaker at the end, but certainly that's something that keeps me awake at night and gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yes, I think the era of economic security just began, and we have to think about these additional costs we face these days, and this kind of coordinating economic security policies is very important. So we should start our talks with countries that share common interests. Thank you.
I think I already mentioned about the importance of the cooperation among the US and Korea and Europe. And I think that maybe addressing the climate change issues, we have lots of climate-related issues will be talked about on the coming later. But kind of this forum or some the seminar will be helpful for understanding, enhance the stressing and among those three trilateral parties. And thank you.
Okay, we spent a lot of time to deal with the economic security, climate change, and also digital trade in this session. In the previous session, we also talked about the subsidy stuff and WTO reform and go on. A lot of challenges in many areas. It's a time to work together to try to create opportunity and possible positive outcomes. May the force be with us. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for all the participants, and I also like to thanks to the KIEP to organize this really wonderful event. Thanks.
Thank you. Now I would like to conclude 2023 seminar on potential for trilateral trade cooperation among Korea, the EU, and the US. We appreciated all of our honorable attendees online and offline. Have a good night in US and Belgium, and have a good day here in Korea. Thank you.